Good morning or afternoon or evening, everyone. Looks like the numbers are holding steady here at 21 for the moment, so we'll just go ahead and jump in. We've made it to session 4. Welcome back to those who joined us for the earlier sessions, and welcome them if this is your first EC3 2.0 conversation with us. Thanks so much for the many ways you support building transparency and help shape EC3. I am Allison Kin-Bennett, for those I haven't met yet, about 5 months into my role here as Executive Director, and I'm joined today again by Aziza Priota, our Data Manager, Václav Hasek, our Technical Director, and Michaela De Rousseau, former B tier, now supporting us in these efforts as an independent consultant. Across all 4 sessions, we're listening carefully and intentionally, translating your feedback directly into the EC3 2.0 roadmap. In the past few sessions, we've explored the EPD data ecosystem and project-level decision-making workflows. Today is about the API integrations and developer experience and how EC3 can serve as a platform that enables the broader ecosystem to innovate and have positive impact. Next slide, please. We've talked about BT's mission and EC's role as the trusted global data infrastructure for climate action, and we know that infrastructure matters most when it's open, stable, and extensible. The focus for EC3 2.0 is to be a platform that others can confidently build on, not to replicate what commercial tools do well, but to be the stable, trusted foundation underneath them. And again, for those that haven't heard, while this series is about EC3 2.0, we're really excited about a partnership to bring Tally 2.0 to market this year. So stay tuned for more on that soon. Next slide. As always, thank you so much to this ecosystem of philanthropic supporters. And next slide, please. Our implementation and technology partners and collaborators. We are deeply grateful. The foundation you've helped build is what allows us to modernize thoughtfully. Next slide. So many of you here today are developers, integrators, technical leads, the people who build the connections between EC3 and the tools your teams and clients actually use every day. Your feedback is especially important because API and integration decisions have downstream consequences for performance, reliability, what's even possible for the broader ecosystem to accomplish. So today we want to understand, amongst many other things, we have a very long list on our to-dos, but particularly where the current API and integration points are working well for your use cases, where you're hitting limitations or inconsistencies or gaps, where better developer tooling could unlock new workflows or partnerships, and where EC3 could open up capabilities that don't exist today. So whether you're deep in the code base or evaluating what's possible for future integration, thank you, your input matters. So please add any questions in the Q&A. We're also monitoring the chat. The Q&A has been a little bit finicky for some. Speak up during the session when we call on that opportunity. Just raise your hand, we can unmute you. And take a few minutes to complete the additional feedback form that I linked in the Q&A. With that, I'll hand it to Václav.
Thanks, Allison. And again, once again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being our supporter and user. And again, we value all the feedback that we get throughout the years, but also today. For anyone that's new on the call, I see some repeated people here again, but for anyone that's new, a little bit of an overview of the feedback that we've already synthesized for this EC3 2.0 roadmap. A lot of that feedback comes from our report bugs and feedback functionality within the tool. We also have multiple email channels that we kind of collate into the same set of feedback line items. And then we also, as mentioned, have our latest feedback form that you can fill out and provide additional feedback as we're gearing up towards the next set of development which we are really excited about, is the basically overhaul of the EC3 tool and addressing a lot of the pain points that have either been around for a while or are brand new. So with that, our synthesis of all of that feedback is touching on 15 different sort of topical areas that we've identified. Today, we are focused on mainly the integration parts, but ultimately, a lot of these integration aspects transcend a lot of the other topics. So there's going to be a few topics or line items that are actually being repeated. So far, we have about 144 individual things, tasks, or requests that we're tracking to potentially change, update, or add to EC3 2.0. So again, these sessions help us prioritize, add anything that we might still be missing, and just see how many of these are pain points or interests for multiple people and multiple different stakeholders at the table. A little bit of a level setting again, just like in the other sessions. So the two main components of EC3, as you may know, are the EPD database, where you can search for EPDs and other data types, and then the project planner, which mostly our architects, engineers, contractors use. This overview, I think, particularly in regards to this session, just highlights that a lot of the integrations or collaborations that we have help us have such a high number of EPDs in the database, right? So those 120,000 EPDs, large portion of those come in from direct integration partners that send data to us, in addition to some of the data that we digitize ourselves. And then on the project sides, which is most of the numbers down at the bottom of this page, I would say maybe about half of the projects that end up in EC3 are actually coming from various integrations. That are not projects that are manually entered into EC3. So again, just stressing the importance and value and appreciation for a lot of the third parties that are working with us on a lot of this EC3 work. Again, for context setting, before we dive into the deep dive topics and really feedback session for the integration partners here, a couple of level setting items for, I would say, the front end functionality of EC3, which also kind of reflects what's then available in the background in the API. So database of EPDs, I think, is an obvious one. We also have the digitization process of PDFs that you can also access via API. You can get a list of different categories that we develop, and including some of the different attributes or properties that are relevant to these different materials. These properties can be added, for your searches, and this can be done on the user interface side, but the same happens on the API side. You can also fetch the larger details of individual products, so you don't have to just get lists. And there are differences in the amount of data that you get about an EPD, depending if you pull a list or if you pull an individual EPD data point. You can also access some of the statistics for categories of searches when you're using the API. And you can then do comparisons of manufacturer statistics or other types of comparisons on your end once you have all the data. On the project side of things, again, you can access the project information via the API, all of the fields that are visible here. You can also access the views of projects. And this is one thing that is on our roadmap. Currently, you cannot access any of the calculators via API, but it has been repeated request to make this available either via the API or as an individual component. For A4 transportation and A5 construction impacts, you can also define those aspects via the API if you're pushing data to EC3. And the results and analytics. So this one you cannot access via the API, but again, in the past, we have gotten some requests if this could just be enabled as a component that other third-party platforms could pull in. And there are sharing settings at the project level, as well as some export capabilities. I think the export settings are more relevant for anyone that's API developer, because it does potentially play into the structure of how you transfer project information between your platforms and EC3. And so that's kind of the overview of some of the high-level capabilities of EC3 that you may know about, or maybe you have not actually interacted that much with, but that are there. And if you are a third-party developer, know that there are opportunities, for you to interface and integrate with all of those various components of EC3. With that, let's go into some of the feedback sessions. So again, a little bit of a recap from session number 1, which focused on the overarching overview of why we're going ahead with this EC3 2.0 effort. We have had, again, you heard me say, a long list of requests that have kind of piled up over the years and that we haven't really been able to address over the past year as we kind of try to stabilize and maintain building transparency and the EC3 tool itself. We've only really been investing into security aspects and then fixing some of the critical core issues that have been reported or that have been coming up. Really, this EC3 2.0 project allows us to now finally actually dive deep, rethink some of the functionality, again, regrow our team, which has been slowly growing over the past few months as well, and really start addressing some of the larger pain points across all of the stakeholder users. Some of those main components of the overhaul include interface improvements, platform simplification, as well as addressing some of the performance issues like long loading times and kind of rigidity of some of the user interface. We do understand that different people have different preferences, and so we do want to make sure that the user interface is inviting, usable by all the different stakeholders that we serve. And also with the advancements in AI, we have heard a lot of requests for AI assistance capability, so that's also on our list. In terms of actually today's topics, schemas, APIs, and integrations, we've heard at a higher level, we've heard a lot of feedback about in certain places using more consistent patterns. I'll actually ask a question a little bit later that's related to this, but we do have 2 different sets of APIs that we maintain, and some of the naming conventions, some of the structure of the responses can be slightly different between the 2, which sometimes confuses some of our third-party integrators. And I think it's critical to make all of the definitions of the different properties and attributes as self-explanatory and well-defined in all of our documentation. So there's less opportunity for misinterpretation or errors, in other platforms that are relying on our data. We've also heard some feedback about improving the search capabilities. So, for example, when you're searching for specific type of EPDs, matching certain attributes, geographical locations, spanning multiple categories, that we've heard some requests that some of it is not super easy to use. So if there are some improvement opportunities for the search, as well as improving the performance again of how fast some of those responses get to you, all of those topics are on our minds. With that, I think I already mentioned better documentation and also response messages, especially for the users that are trying to push data via the API into EC3. We have heard, we hear you, and we do have plans to improve some of the response messages, some of the validations, that are embedded into the API to make sure that you don't get just a vague response like, the attempt was not successful and not really telling you why, right? You can't really do much about it. You have to reach out to us. We have to go dig deeper, etc. So those are all things that we are thinking about through this EC3 2.0 development. And then again, back to kind of the AI topics, we have also heard some requests for creating MCPs for the EC3 data. So that is also on our list. Again, let us know how high it is on your own priority list. Another recap from session number 2. So we really dove deep on some of the EPD specific topics. Hopefully you were able to attend those sessions. If not, there will still be some opportunity today to ask some of the EPD related questions if you have them. We also, in session number 3, went over the project planner really in depth with a lot of the mostly, I think, user interface related topics. But again, if there are integrators on this call that are integrating with the project planner, feel free to ask any sort of project planner related questions that are not necessarily on the integrator list, which I will get to next. With that, we'll switch over to the interactive part of these sessions, and that's really where I'll show you some bullet points, some of the topics that are most related to API and integrations. I'm going to ask some starting questions on some of them, and really what we want is to hear from you. If you have either clarifying questions, you're excited about some of the plans that we have, or you have additional topics or feedback that you would like to share, please let us know. Again, this helps us identify highest priorities, and also if you have design ideas, that is a huge help, to our planning efforts as well. So with that, let's do a deep dive into APIs and integrations, and I'll just open it up with those 4 points that I mentioned on one of the recap slides. If there are integrators on this call and you have had some of these pain points or some suggestions for improvements on the patterns in the API and the schemas or in the searches that you're making, please let us know your thoughts. Is there anyone that would like to chime in right off the bat? Michelle?
Hi, we've struggled a little bit with querying for EPDs, mainly because sometimes if we're looking for a supplier in a particular category, you get back so many results and it's kind of confusing for us which one we should use. So we've fallen back onto just using industry baselines. Do you have documentation available that for the EPD search part? Do you now have more documentation on how to access that via API?
Yes, and actually, one of the questions I wanted to ask for anyone that's on the call, as I mentioned, we have 2 sets of APIs that we maintain. We have the OpenEPD API and then the internal EC3 API, both of which are available to third-party integrators. So I wonder, from the people that are on the call, if you are using the OpenEPD API, can you give a thumbs up so that we know who you are? And let's do it now. And sorry, Michelle, I'll get to your question just in a second here. But if you are using the OpenEPD API endpoints,
You want a hand raise so you can associate it with a name, Vaslav, instead of the React
that's right.
thumbs ups. Yeah.
Yeah, either hand raise or some sort of a reaction. I'll just give people a second to orient themselves with Teams.
Just saw 1 thumbs up.
Okay. And then for the other one, so how about anyone that's using the internal EC3 API? Any thumbs up or raise hands? Yeah. So we have more folks using the internal API. Great. So back to the question of searches, I think there is actually an endpoint that is very similar to EPDs in the internal API, and it should be the materials endpoint, which does include some additional functionalities around searching for groups of EPDs. And so, yeah, I think that there's a part of the materials endpoint where you can search using the material filter query language, which essentially mimics what you can do on the user interface front end of EC3. You can select the category that you're searching in, and you can select all the individual attributes that you want to search for. And that will give you similar results as what you would get on the EC3 front end. This is one of the things that I think is just not super obvious in the documentation, because a lot of our API integrators, they know they're looking for EPDs, and so they go to the EPDs endpoint, but ultimately the capabilities and the original intent with which those endpoints were created were slightly different from just searching across multiple different product types. So yeah, I would recommend going into the materials endpoint and actually reading up a little bit about the material filter query language as well. Anthony?
Yeah, hi. Thanks again for doing these sessions. I'm a bit confused. So first off, the OpenEPD and the EC3 API, are they both completely current? Like, is one more updated than the other? Like, and why are there two different APIs? That and they're like, I'm a bit confused with that. I think I'm mainly I may have raised my hand for the other one, but I'm actually mainly using the EC3 one. But then when I was using the EC3 one, I was having a lot of trouble. I didn't realize later on that there was these like, because like there's all these attributes, but they're specific to individual material categories, but it's not exactly clear which attributes belong to which material category. And then later on, I figured out after I finished my report on the tool comparison stuff was like there's this like soft search terms thing that you can then kind of correlate some attributes to um, some of the material categories, but at the time when I was trying to do this, it wasn't immediately obvious, like how to classify this, especially because I was trying to classify all the different material data points. So I think it was a bit confusing on that. But yeah, sorry, and then also I'm confused with like the materials endpoint versus the EPD's endpoint. Are they like is it a one-to-one connection between them, and why are they two different endpoints then?
Yeah, all good questions. So starting with the two different APIs that we have, and are they basically the same in terms of data availability? They are. So if you are looking for a list of EPDs, both of them are querying the same data from the same database. So basically just different entry points to get to that data. And they will also provide the data in slightly different format, as you already alluded to as well. So even though we're providing the same exact data, it might take on slightly different shape between the two APIs. The internal EC3 API was the first one that we developed, and it was really just for the EC3 tool itself. So it was really developed with just the ease of use on our own, for our own user interface. And at the time, I think we also had a smaller list of attributes that we were tracking across smaller list of different material categories. And so that's why you see kind of a giant long list of attributes on the internal EC3 API side of things when you're receiving the EPD data. OpenEPD API was developed a little bit later after the launch of EC3 with the goal of making the integrator's life a little bit easier or more intuitive. And so with the OpenEPD API, it was, first of all, intentionally made with being available publicly in mind, right? So hopefully have a lower learning curve for entry of use of that data. The other issue with providing different attributes is also one of the main differences between the internal EC3 API and the OpenEPD API. OpenEPD API will actually only give you the attributes that are relevant for the material category for which you're looking for EPDs for, which will then make your life easier because you don't have to actually understand the full list and understand the mapping to different material categories. Those are the two, not two, but those are some of the couple main differences between the two and the motivation behind why we have both. I think ultimately it is actually a little bit of a, it adds burden and difficulty of maintenance for us to manage two different APIs. So one of the things that we are actively thinking through is again kind of deciding on which one is more used, which one has a better starting point structure, but ultimately, hopefully, having to maintain only a single set of APIs again. On the materials endpoint side of things, that's again a little bit of a side product of how EC3 was being developed in the early stages of its development. And it was, those endpoints were specifically built for some of the search functionalities within EC3 itself. And they were basically slightly different from the need of just listing all EPDs, all at once, without heavy filtering for any specific attributes. So again, the materials endpoint was really built with advanced search and filtering in mind, specifically for the EC3 tool initially. The long term, again, I think this is where our opportunity for changes lies, right? Is making the distinction a little bit more intuitive, and in our documentation, providing more guidance on which one to use when. But ultimately, in the future, maybe there's an overall opportunity for restructuring some of the endpoints so that everything is more intuitive off the bat.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions on these four? I think these are actually they are a little bit open-ended, but they are at the crux of anyone that's integrating with EC3. So again, if there are any more reflections on these 4 bullet points, please don't hesitate to provide feedback. Otherwise, we can go through some of a little bit repetitive bullet points from the previous sessions and just, again, take a look at them from an API perspective.
Vaslav, do you have anything to add to my response to Michelle regarding the pilot categories? We're in the midst of a plan to make them all accessible with the appropriate caveats. I don't know if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, that's right. So we're currently thinking through actually restructuring, like Allison mentioned, restructuring how we treat the pilot categories or categories that are pilot right now. We do get a lot of feedback that some of them have been in pilot for years, and sometimes people feel like there's valuable EPDs in those categories that they can't access, and it kind of feels like a pay-to-play space. That has never been the intent, really. The intent has been with some of these categories is that we might create sort of a draft kind of shell structure for what a category looks like. And then with the help of the industries that are experts on some of these topics, we develop a list of attributes that are actually worth tracking and trying to extract from EPDs. And then we also think about the search functionality within those categories to make sure that we try and align the EPDs for comparability purposes as much as possible. that process of figuring out which attributes and how to allow their search and how to extract them from EPDs can be pretty long and time consuming. And today we have over 200 different categories. And with a small team, you can just kind of imagine that that's a little bit hard to manage and develop effectively, and it may take time. And to some extent, we also just didn't have clear sort of timeline or path towards fully publishing all of the categories that have been drafted and put in pilot. Again, that's our approach to that is probably gonna change a little bit. We want to make sure that all the EPDs that are out there are available, no matter if they are, in a fully fleshed out category or not. The caveat is going to be that we're going to just have to change how we are providing some of those EPDs. So we're going to have to put in a little bit more guardrails to make sure that any of the currently pilot categories, if they have not gone through that robust process of aligning the data and adding some of the search filters, etc., that is abundantly clear to our users and integrators. We can address those things on our own user interface, but it's definitely a little bit harder to do when the data is being accessed programmatically through the API. So I think we still have a little bit of planning and thinking to do to make sure that even the API users are warned and get some hints that they should be building in their own guardrails for use of some of the EPD data in the categories. But again, we are moving towards a direction where we don't go through this years-long process of just not allowing you to access some of that data. So I hope that helps.
We have Anthony's hand up, but a couple questions that came in before that from Jared and Riley. I don't know if you fully answered Jared's question already.
OMF query language in OpenEPD is very confusing. Does this documentation exist anywhere? Yes, so the OMF query language is the same as the material filter query language inside of EC3, and there's a little bit of a more, little bit longer write-up on the material filter query language in the internal EC3 API documentation. It's actually before you get to the actual list of endpoints. If you just go into EC3 and you open up the gear icon and you go into the API documentation space, the first thing that will come up on that page is a guide for developers or integrators. And I believe it's the last section of that guide is actually talking about the structure of the material filter query language. So there's a little bit more explanation of the general structure of it and how it works. And I think there's one example about how it can be used. I'll also say that if you want more examples, you can also go inside of EC3, open up the developer console, and then look for the materials or statistics queries that EC3 is making on the network tab, because those will include those material filter queries. And so you can see a couple more examples on how some of those queries are structured across the various categories in the tool. But it's a good question, and I actually have a counter question to the entire audience here is, how many of you are using the material filter query? Are you having the same sort of issues in Jared? And are there alternatives that you are thinking of, or you're wondering why we wouldn't use something a little bit more typical, more established? If there are other ways of helping you query, groups of products. Yeah, my question is, what's your own experience with the material filter query? And Anthony, your question or feedback might be about something else, but yeah, still wondering about material filter query, but other things as well. So anyone that wants to chime in, please feel free to. Anthony?
Yeah, I had well, I mean, on the materials filter front, I was also confused with that. So I mean, ultimately in the end, I was yeah. So I do think search is a big issue with like traversing all of these different fields, especially given that like sometimes what you're trying to find is across multiple attributes in like across like 200 columns of data to really construct exactly what to help you kind of filter through what you're looking for. So when you're going through all that data, it is quite challenging, I would say. Um, I think on top, so sorry, I'm not sure if I'm fully answering like the question that you're talking about the material filter, but what I was gonna ask, or actually, do you want to poll other people on this topic first before I ask other questions?
No one else is raising their hand or
Okay,
putting anything in the chat right now about that.
sure. Um, so the in your EPD's endpoint, when you're downloading, like you can get the list of EPDs, but not every field is in there. So in particular, if in the future you expand to looking at the 6 impact categories or the other like non-GWP impact categories, those fields are only in the EPD endpoint where you search per ID. But that's obviously extremely cumbersome to go through and query each individual, ID to find those fields. So ideally you move those fields over to like the EPD's endpoint, the main EPD's endpoint, so that when you're listing it, you get those fields. That's one thing. Um, on top of that, I would say if you're, uh, I'm not clear how much of the past, how much of your whole database you've collected data for example, those 6 impact categories, or also for any of those attributes, right? So like you said, there's like 100, 200 attributes, right? Well, sometimes when you're searching through those attributes, it's not clear, like there's a lot of null values even within a certain category, right? So then it's like, how useful are those filters? Because I actually don't know how complete they are because like maybe you've had different phases of scraping or sorry, let's say you're extracting that data from PDFs and you have the cohort that you've done from like, I don't know, 5 years ago or however many years ago, and then now like the latest ones maybe you're better at extracting that, but like if you don't go back and recollect all of it, it's very hard to have confidence in those attribute filters because well, I don't know, I don't have a sense of like how complete they are for each of the categories. So I don't know if you can comment on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So um, the I think this is one of our largest opportunities, I think, in terms of this EC3 2.0 effort is kind of reparsing maybe not an entirety of the database, but a lot of the previously digitized data as well, and do a little bit of a cleanup, as well as addition of some of the attributes or properties that we have space for, but have not been filled in. You're absolutely right that as our digitization processes have changed, right, maybe we didn't actually have some of the attributes or filters um, in the schemas in the first place initially. So like, let's say 2 years ago, we had a very light MEP system set of categories, which didn't actually track a lot of attributes for different MEP systems. We just completed a set of development for some of the mechanical systems where we've added additional attributes that we can track. And again, during this effort, this initial effort with some of the industry partners, we have actually gone through all of those EPDs and those categories and try to parse as much of those fields as possible. But that really, this kind of comprehensive effort, digitization efforts, only happens at the beginning of defining a category and defining all those fields. When we add new attributes years down the road, sometimes we try and extract that additional attribute data from the existing EPDs. But in some cases we don't, and then you get into this sort of issue that you've pointed out, that you don't really know how reliable searching in some of those fields is. So again, in EC3 2.0, we're going to have this opportunity where we can try and extract additional attribute data if available. The if available is the other sort of challenge in this whole question and discussion, because as you know, not all EPDs actually report some of the attributes that would either be useful or that we have availability to store and provide to third parties. And yeah, currently I agree, it's not clear if we actually tried extracting it and it just wasn't there. All you see is a null value if we don't get it, right? And then some of the search filters, even on the user interface, are then kind of misleading because you might think that you can search for concretes that are using white cement, but that's only if you actually know that we're getting the information that EPDs have white cement in them, right? So I think, yeah, I hear you. I hear that feedback, and I think what we will add on our list is, again, instead of just providing null values, think about, is there more context that we can provide about the completeness of having some of these attributes for various searches?
Great, thanks. I think, and I just want to add my support for the MCP. I do believe strongly that that would be a really good thing.
Yeah.
But I think you need to clean up your API in order for the MCP to be useful, right? Because
Yeah.
like you can imagine returning a JSON file with like 200 attributes, just like a giant list of columns. It's like for each entry. I don't know that that's going to be very useful. So you need a way of like condensing that down to something that's like relevant, because like you want to feed exactly the right context for like in this EPD, this is what this EPD represents. And yeah, it's just got to be kind of efficient, and especially if you're trying to query many EPDs at a time or search through it efficiently. So I think a lot of the improvements that you're trying to work on to like help improve the searching and functionality and speed and everything, and like cleaning up the API, that needs to be done first. Otherwise, the way it's currently structured, if you pass that to an MCP, I don't think it's going to be very useful.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
I wanted to quickly add also, I just remembered you mentioned the difference in the EPD's list response and the EPD details response, and that only one of them provides the other impact categories. I mean, so just a quick comment on that. There's a reason why we do that right now, because the other impact categories come in, many different shapes and forms, as you know. And so it's a little bit harder to put into just like a table with 6 columns, as you may imagine. When we provide the GWP data, which is basically just a single value in the list, in the EPD's list form, we're already doing the work to basically make sure that all of those GWP values are as aligned as possible, normalized, etc., and that they are also reported using the end user's preferred LCIA method. Again, it becomes a little bit more challenging when you add on 6 other impact categories, and in some cases even more. In Europe, I'm sure people would like us to have 10 or 15 or how many there are in European EPDs. So it just becomes a little bit more challenging to putting all of those different environmental impact categories normalized into a list table. But
I'm not sure I understand why that's challenging to put it in there. Like you're just worried the response is too big because like you're filling in too many fields, or
it's because,
or is it the normalization that's hard?
It's the normalization part. Yeah, it's the normalization part, because we do additional normalization on the GWP value when we're providing it, so that we don't actually, in the list form, I believe you don't get to see if it's coming initially from the Tracy category or not. I think there's a way to basically deduce it from the LCIA based uncertainty that comes with that value. because that all gets related to your user preferences. Are your preferences towards Tracy 2.1 impact category or LCI method, or is it for something else, like, you know, EF 3.0, some other? So again, it's mainly the normalization step. That's kind of the challenge.
We have about 15 minutes left, and Riley's been waiting patiently, and I don't know how to answer this question. It's regarding importing BIM data as a way to start a project in EC3. And the question is, does the BIM model need to be created based on a specific standard to enable this?
So we have some current BIM integrations with specific platforms. And in all of those integrations, the structure of the data in the third-party platform might be totally different from ours. So basically, we did some work on basically the mapping and translation of those third-party platform structures or standard ways of organizing project data. And we basically map it into the structure of the EC3 project planner. So that's what has to be done for any sort of integration. There's no, I mean, there's like standards like IFC, you know, that is standardizing on the structure of project data from BIM platforms. But ultimately, I think most of the platforms still kind of start from a different set of structures. I know I'm not specifically a BIM expert, but I believe that this has been kind of a challenge as well within the BIM industry on trying to agree on what the standard structure of a project would look like. And even with IFC, I think sometimes you just get some loss of information when you're exporting data in the IFC format. And we don't currently have just like an IFC import functionality for EC3. It's always a specific connector with other BIM platforms. So if there are additional BIM platform integrations that people are looking for, let us know. Sometimes we can reach out to those other platform developers. But ultimately, usually it's about, does the third-party platform hear enough feedback from their own users about the desire and need to be able to transfer data or use data from EC3. So I hope that helps answer the question.
I don't know if there's more slides you want to get through, but we do have a couple more questions around.
Yeah.
Go from here.
I've taken a little bit different approach this session. Instead of going through the full list, you know, I did kind of just focus on the schemas and API integrations. Yep. Everything else kind of transcends. But I can maybe point out a couple of things on this list. And if anyone sees a topic that really jumps out at them, you know, please unmute yourself and ask questions about it as well. During the EPD management session, I did mention that we have some plans for better EPD versioning and linking system for related EPDs. Right now, when we're managing EPDs that expire and are replaced by our newer version, we don't always have a good link between the two. And so we've heard, you know, from people, can you provide, let's say, a product ID that kind of links multiple versions of different EPDs? There's challenges to that, but it's on our mind. When we merge EPDs, there's currently no redirect system, so sometimes third-party integration references back to EPDs that may have been deduplicated on our end, may actually run into an issue where the links that should be permanent do, in certain cases, break because of the deduplication process. So one of the other line items on the list here is to fix that issue. And then also we have been asked for webhooks for any changes to EPDs. I wonder if there are any other people on the call here that are interested in that, there is one way that you can currently check for changes in EPDs, and that's providing the updated, there's a query parameter that you can add updated since a certain date. So if you are checking on your end periodically, you could just check for the EPDs that have been in some form or shape added or changed since your last check. Any other questions that are coming up in the Q&A or chat about anything?
Yes. Jason's asking about how to submit digital EPDs. It's daunting due to the number of attributes in the schemas, and where's the documentation or examples that would help?
Got it. So I think you're talking about, let's say you're creating an EPD. Currently, we have some collaborations with LCA developing platforms and program operator platforms. And we basically set up those organizations to be able to deposit EPDs digitally into the tool. In order to do that, you would use any of the same endpoints, but with the post requests. And there is documentation in both OpenEPD and the internal EC3 API on what's expected on the in the payload of those post requests. And when you make the post request to EC3, you will then get also feedback about any issues. Like if you're missing certain data that's required, you will get a message back that is happening. And again, in some of the cases, we have heard feedback that the messages are not actually super clear, and people kind of get stuck in submitting the data. There's one thing that you need in order to be digitally depositing data into EC3, and that's you need to be set up with our curator account, or the account that is to be used to deposit those EPDs. So if you have that use case in mind, please reach out to us. We'll set you up, and we can actually set up a call with you and walk you through some of the things that you might need to know to successfully deposit data to EC3.
You. And Jared's asking about the decision to separate materials from EPDs in the original EC3 API.
So I think that's along the lines of the two different endpoints that are available, right? And I think, yeah, initially it was just the way that EC3 itself was being structured. The EPD endpoint was really just for listing tables of EPDs without any deep search functionalities. The materials endpoint was built with the material query filter language embedded in it. And it also then provides you the updated access to statistics based on the specific search criteria. So that's, I think, the main difference between the two. Otherwise, they still kind of go and access the same EPD data in the database. It's just that they have slightly different functionalities in the questions you can ask in those two endpoints.
And Suki is asking about, you had mentioned importing a spreadsheet as a starting point. What inputs would be necessary? And would the material categorization be automated?
So I think this is specifically related to the project planner, right? And this is, I think, more for the architect, engineering, construction users, which, yes, we have had a lot of requests for spreadsheet-based input or starting point, or import, spreadsheet-based import into the project planner. That is on our list, and there are some additional related features, like what was mentioned, potentially having, machine learning algorithms or AI help pre-fill some of the category information. That is on our list. That's currently not available. Although, if you are using the API, like if you're an advanced user, you could probably actually build a plugin or similar type of thing to help people do that. Otherwise, yeah, it's on our list, and we'll try and embed that in EC3 2.0.
And Michelle's asking if you can speak a little bit about embedding the EC3 material search component.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Can you speak a little about embedding the EC3 material search component? Or Michelle, you can come off mute and
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I just saw it on the EPD search list. So I was curious what you meant by that, because we could obviously build something on our side that you put the queries in and then we query via the material filter. But so I was just wondering what that meant.
Got it. Yeah, great question. So you're right. So basically, we provide the API today, but in order to be able to search for group of products with specific attributes in the API, as was mentioned on the call multiple times, you would need to know which attributes are relevant to specific categories, and then build up your own user interface with, let's say, drop-down menus, etc., to be able to let your users do the same functionality that EC3 does on the search page. And so, that is not super trivial. And we have heard some requests for, well, could we just embed your search page into our tool so that we don't have to rebuild it? And currently, that's not something that's possible, but it is, again, on our list to actually provide certain aspects of EC3 as potentially embeddable components into other third-party platforms. So again, I think I hear that you would be interested in that, and we'll make sure that we take a note of that and prioritize accordingly.
Yeah, I think for North America, I feel like the EPDs are pretty, there's quite a lot of good EPDs, but maybe for Europe and wider, it can be difficult to find matching EPDs, and then you're falling back onto industry ones. And then obviously you have a lot of industry EPDs as well. Some are global, some are area, region specific. So I think that part of it would be amazing, because then maybe people could set up some, even if it's just some defaults of the kind of industry EPDs they would like to use when supplier or manufacturer EPDs aren't available. Yeah, that would be pretty cool if that was available.
Got it. Yeah, and along the same lines, I wonder how many people on the call are integrating again with the project level API, or how many people here have used the project views, collections, and the calculators specifically within the project planner. We have had a few requests for the calculators themselves also be available via API or as components. So that's kind of the last part on the list. But along similar lines as the EPD search functionality, I think there's additional things we could do on the assembly front as well. If you are interested in that, thumbs up or let us know and we'll prioritize accordingly. With that, I think, Allison, we only have a couple minutes left. So any last questions to let people ask, or have a quick wrap up?
Yeah, let me just make sure that everyone has a chance to applaud Vaslav for this amazing series. I have learned so much, and I'm just so grateful for the depth of thinking that has gone into this session from not only Vaslav, but obviously all of our participants. So yes, thank you for the show of hands and the hearts. And please, as you think about, we're not going to ever close this feedback form. Will be a constant iteration, but yes, the goal is to get an EC3 2.0 out by the end of the year, and hopefully you'll begin to see improvements, less lagginess, etc., much earlier than that. So we look forward to continuing the conversation. I didn't want to call this the final feedback session. We will be continuing to look for your support and engagement as we evolve the tool.
Thank you all for coming and sharing your feedback. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to ask?
Anthony,
Sorry, I've been probably
we should
asking
make
too
you
many
a
questions.
presenter next time.
No. I'm just asking questions. Yeah, I typed in a question basically on the global data front. You mentioned adding more global data. I'm wondering what do you think the current coverage is, and like are there specific regions you're targeting? Are there data sources where or aggregators that you're trying to get this data from as well? Just anything that you can share about global data.
Yeah, actually, I was going to follow up with, do you have specific program operators or regions in mind that we're missing the most? We currently have, or we are closely, talking to, let's say, Eco Platform in Europe. They have recently slightly changed their access to the data, so they've opened up a new API. And so we're currently actually going through the update of our own whole system of that European data. So again, you should see more European data trickling through pretty soon, for example, on that specific front. In other regions, we have previously did like periodic pushes for getting like Japanese EPDs. We've tried to connect with the Korean Institute for Environment, or whatever the Department of Environment is. But their structure for EPDs is slightly different, so it didn't materialize into getting their EPD-like data into the tool. But again, if there's interest in that specifically, for example, right, that will be another fuel to the fire for us to go and re-engage with them again. And so it would be helpful to hear kind of which other regions specifically people are interested in. It's true that we have better coverage in certain regions globally than others. It's not super uniform across the whole globe, but we do have global data today.
Awesome. That's great to hear about Eco Platform. I think China, I would just add that in as well if you can find additional data. Yeah, great. Thanks. Amazing work.
Thank you.
Yes, and you should be able to find the recording for all the sessions on our homepage at the top very shortly. Thanks again. I know I have to run to another meeting. Wishing you all a great day, and we'll continue to keep in touch as things evolve here.
Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Vaslav. See you soon, everyone.